Hi, y'all, and welcome to tonight's live stream. We're doing an extra bonus live stream tonight, Saturday night, because we just have so much to cover. Charlie Adelson has been convicted of murdering Dan Markel, his ex-brother-in-law. The state has arrested his mother, Donna Adelson, and charged her with being part of the conspiracy and part of the murder plot. Now the state has seized Harvey Adelson's cell phones and iPad. And tonight we're going to ask the question, is Harvey next? Is he the next person? There are already 5 people in jail or prison related to the murder of Dan Markel. Is someone else going to be arrested? And we're going to be looking at the question of Harvey for tonight. We are going to be doing a deep dive into the evidence. What is the evidence against Harvey Adelson? We've already looked at Wendi, and I know a lot of you have questions about that. I'll link that after YouTube is finished processing the live, so it'll be a couple of hours after the live ends. Now, I hope that by the time you listen to this, you are settled somewhere warm and comfy on a cold winter's night. I've got my fuzzy warm sweater. I tried to make hot chocolate. I told everybody, bring your hot drink with you. I'm probably the only person in the entire world who can burn a packet of hot chocolate. But anyway, I can't even touch the cup. I have to have a mitt to touch it. So hopefully it'll cool down and then I can have some. Let me know what you brought tonight. I heard from Lori. She's bringing homemade hot chocolate. Lisa has her hot tea. Pretty Pearls has some coffee. So let me know what you have cooking up for tonight. Now, I want to show you the graph that we use, slightly amended, throughout the Adelson trial of Charlie Adelson. Everybody on that bottom row has been convicted. We've got Charlie, that's the latest person to be convicted, Charlie Adelson, Katie Medbanowa, Sigfrido Garcia, and Luis Rivera. All 4 of those have been convicted of killing Dan Markel. He's the man I have to the left there. Dan Markel was an FSU law professor, a Harvard law grad, and he was murdered in the garage of his home by 2 hitmen. And they've been convicted, Sigfrido Garcia and Luis Rivera. They were hired by Katie Medbanowa. She was the 3rd person to be convicted. Luis Rivera pled guilty. Sigfrido Garcia was tried and convicted. Katie had a hung jury. They tried her again, and she was convicted. And then she turned state's evidence. Charlie Adelson was then convicted. Now, Donna Adelson has been arrested. That's Charlie's mother. Now, why are the Adelsons involved? It's because of the fact that Wendi, not circled in red there, because she hasn't been arrested or charged, but she was married to Dan Markel. They were divorced for about a year when Dan Markel was murdered, and they were still in the middle of a very bitter custody dispute, very, very bad one. So up until now, I think most people figured it was a good possibility that Donna would be arrested following Charlie, and that's happened. And most people would have thought, well, Wendi would come next. Harvey being kind of the dark horse. I mean, he didn't seem to have as much of a stake in this. There wasn't as much evidence related to him. And yet, and in fact, even the state seemed ambivalent. Sometimes they named him as a co-conspirator, but sometimes they didn't. For example, right before Katie Medbanowa's trial, there was a statement that Donna, Charlie, and Wendi were all co-conspirators, but Harvey wasn't named there. At other times, he's been named as a co-conspirator. So was he involved? Not. It's been harder to know. And so what we're going to be looking at tonight is, what is the evidence that Harvey was involved? What's the evidence that there was actual proof that the state can use about whether or not Harvey was involved? And the reason we're looking at that now is because just this past week, the state issued a search warrant. They actually before that, but it was issued on they filed it on the 28th, and then it was actually entered on the 29th of November. And they have asked to look at, well, they've already taken his 2 cell phones and an iPad, and they've asked the court to allow them to search those. They've had them since the 14th when they searched the house after they arrested Donna Adelson. So now they've said, we want to look at those. That, I think, means we have to take a look at the question remaining. Are they looking at that solely because it could be evidence against Donna Adelson, or is there a belief by the state, and is there evidence by the state that Harvey might have been involved in the murder of Dan Markel? Now, I'm going to divide things into three pieces for tonight. The first thing I want to talk about is what the state said in closing. And I've got some clips to show you. I've cut it down. I think it's maybe 10 or 11 minutes. I've forgotten. And I'm just looking at the things that the state said in the closing argument for Charlie Adelson's trial that would relate to something having to do with Harvey, or something that had to do with Donna and Harvey. And I'll talk about how that could relate to whether or not the state believes they have a sufficient case to be able to actually arrest him at some point. Then the next thing I want to look at is two specific pieces of evidence that are important to whether Harvey could be considered guilty or will be considered not guilty. The first is the Dolce Vita, and I again have just a little clip from that of about a minute, and the Matsuri restaurant recording where Harvey met with Charlie. And that's I have like a 3-minute recording there. The third thing I want to do is take a deep dive through the probable cause affidavits where, and there's, excuse me, there's more than one. I need that hot chocolate, right? There's more than one probable cause affidavit. So I'm just going to look at the new parts of each one and take a look at how those might show us what the evidence is against Harvey. Then I'm going to give you my thoughts and, most importantly, ask you for yours. What is it that you think, based on what we've covered, what do you think about whether or not there is a case against Harvey Adelson, or whether they simply don't have enough evidence? Now, so I'm going to get started with the excerpts from the closing argument. These are the most important pieces, I thought, that had to do with Harvey.
Within 1 hour of the shooting, before Professor Markel was even pronounced dead, this path was already pointing to the defendant. When his sister revealed to law enforcement that her family hated Dan Markel and that her brother, Charlie, had joked about hiring a hitman to kill him. And this trash talk, of course, would be meaningless had he not been killed by a hitman. Who did it appear had a motive to want Dan Markel dead? His own family. And what offense had Mr. Markel committed against these people? Refusing to let his children be taken away from him? Objecting to them disparaging him to his kids? The evidence has shown that the Adelson family was all about psychological warfare. And when all else failed, they were willing to go even further to win. In January of 2013, Wendi Adelson filed a motion to allow her to relocate to South Florida with the kids. They were 2 and 3 at that time. As one basis for this request, Wendi cites the wife's parents reside in Coral Springs and the wife's brother resides 20 minutes away. The children are very close to the wife's parents.
Now, throughout the trial of Charlie Adelson, the state made the point that Wendi Adelson very much wanted to take her children to South Florida so that they could be near the grandparents. And nobody wanted that more than Wendy's mother, Donna Adelson, the grandmother. Now, the state, throughout this discussion of what Wendy's motive was and about how Wendi wanted to take the children to South Florida, Wendi wanted to be able to do that and wasn't permitted to do that by the court. Throughout that, they refer to family, Wendy's family, not just her mother, but her family, her parents. It's not limited to just Charlie. It's not limited to Charlie and Donna. It's her parents. So all of that motive could apply to Harvey. He was, after all, the grandfather. Just like Donna was the grandmother, it would have been good for him, too, to have had those kids nearby. And in fact, that's what happened. So that was something that was positive for him. But that's merely a motive. It's not evidence that he was involved. although motive could be a reason for him to then get involved, it's not necessarily evidence that he was involved, but we can see where the state is headed. The state is saying all of these people had a reason to get Dan Markel out of the way because it was Dan who was standing in the way of letting his kids move to South Florida and who wanted to remain in Tallahassee, where he was, after all, a law professor.
Then we go to this May email from Donna Adelson. Wendy, these emails are offered as examples of how invested Donna Adelson was in this litigation and in Wendy's life in general. They reveal that relocation was a huge priority for Donna and that it was also a high priority for Wendi, Harvey, and the defendant as well. Wendi testified that her mom really wasn't that involved in her divorce proceedings. Again, these emails prove the opposite was true. On May 3rd, 2013, this email references Dan's divorce filing as, quote, his 23-page rant. She then crystallizes the importance of relocation, stating, the most important part of your divorce is relocation, in bold. I sincerely hope that your attorney understands this is your, all caps, non-negotiable. She needs to hear from you how serious you are about this and how it will benefit the children with a close-knit family support system as well as your significantly better paying job. But on June 21st, 2013, Wendy's motion to relocate was denied by the court. She had already lost relocation, and her attorney had to get off the case as a result of whatever Danny was filing in court. And he was poised to really take her through the ringer with this grandma motion, the fraud allegation, and the contempt motion that was all pending. Even if he wasn't going to be successful, folks, it was going to be a very unpleasant ride for Wendi Adelson.
Throughout Charlie's trial, the state talked about the fact that Donna desperately wanted those grandkids in South Florida. And they went through a series of sort of, frankly, kind of unhinged emails where she seemed to be really, really wanting the kids to be able to move to South Florida. The state argued that Charlie Adelson wanted to make his mother happy, and that's why he hired or got Katie Medbanawa to hire hitmen to kill Dan Markel. Now, that is also something that could be applied to Harvey. It's, of course, likely that he would want his wife to be happy. That would be something he would want as well. The state is also here referring to the fact that shortly before he was murdered, Dan Markel had filed a motion asking for Donna Adelson to be prevented from having unsupervised visits with her own grandchildren. His reasoning was that he had overheard her on the phone saying some very negative things about him, that he was trying to make she was trying to make it so that the kids wouldn't want to be with him. She was trying to poison the well so that he wouldn't be able to be with his children. And he was upset about that and filed this motion saying, I don't want her to ever be able to have unsupervised visits. She needs to be around people who will stop her from doing that. And of course, that would be upsetting to any grandmother. And so that was one of the things that the state said set off Donna, who then set off Charlie. And so our question that we're asking tonight is there evidence that that also applied to Harvey? Let's keep listening. Oh, and I want to say thank you to Megan O'Leary. I really appreciate that.
Here's a June email from Donna to Wendi. In response to the court order denying relocation, Donna emails Wendi, quote, it's time for action. It's time to take control of your life and not let Gibbers think he's won anything by having you remain in Tallahassee.
Gibbers was a nickname that Wendi said she had privately, not one said affectionately before they were married, but after they were separated and then divorced, she called her husband Gibbers sometimes. Dan Markel.
8 hours away from the only family you have. Let's show this F blank 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 what will make him absolutely miserable. And later, the rest of your life, and consequently, Dad's, mine, and yes, even Charlie's, will be affected by how well you can perform/act before July 31st. You can be a good actress when you want to. I've seen you in action. You need to put on the performance of your life. Jibbers hasn't beaten the Adelson family yet. Let's get this going now. I know you would never want to think that you didn't do absolutely everything you could to come down to your family. Dad and I have changed our lives this year to support you and assist you and the boys in every possible way. Charlie has accepted the loss in the office business income for us to do this because he loves you and wants only the best possible future for you. It's time for you to show us that you can put on the performance of your life for the next few weeks. We're planning on you, Charlie, Dad, and I going as high as equal parts in a $1 million offer. That's $333,000 from each of us. We're a team. We can't do this without your help. You've already lost relocation according to the legal system. Well, it is about winning and losing. We're trying to get a win. You deserve it. You deserve so much more than a life without family teaching in Tallahassee.
Now, notice that all of that is still mostly about Donna Adelson. And it's kind of at a feverish pitch. I mean, it's not sort of a normal discussion like, gee, we would really like to have the kids close to us. It's all about winning and losing, and we need him to lose. We need to win. We're a team. This is a battle. It seems really different from just sort of a calm, rational approach to, hey, we'd really like to have the kids here. What can we do to make that happen? Even the discussion about the $1 million, Charlie's attorney put a witness on the stand, an expert who had actually, I believe, been the divorce attorney for Wendi. And he said, yeah, this is common that it's not that you're paying the person to allow the kids to be able to be in your area, is that you're paying them for the costs of their relocation and then for their expenses as they travel back and forth to their job. So the $1 million would not be a bribe. We are going to give him a way to go back and forth to his teaching job in Tallahassee. We're going to give him a way to be able to get the kids down here so they're near us, but it won't cost him anything, either in terms of moving or in terms of transporting back and forth. How often do you even go anyway? How you don't teach every day. So this would be something we could do. This offer was never actually made. Wendi said that was never actually made. She didn't want to do it. And so there was never this $1 million offer, but it's certainly extraordinary and much higher than you would normally have expected. And I want to say thank you to Mitt Spunky.
Even though the divorce was final on July 31st, 2013, the anger and bitterness associated with this split was still festering. Litigation continued and even increased as both parties filed motions over the next several months alleging that the other was violating the marital settlement agreement. The defendant was hearing about all of this as it went on from his mother. Here she's telling him how terrible things are for Wendi and how it's negatively affecting his dad, hitman.
So notice throughout all of those comments how this has really pulled Harvey into it much more. The way she talks about the fact that we're a team, we've rearranged our lives to help you. She's including Harvey in that. She talks about the fact that Harvey and she together will offer the $333,000. And then in this other portion, she talks about the fact that even the dad's health is actually suffering some because of the fact that he's having to process how difficult all of this is for Wendi as she goes through this very bitter divorce with Charlie.
Other was violating the marital settlement agreement. The defendant was hearing about all of this as it went on from his mother. Here she's telling him how terrible things are for Wendi and how it's negatively affecting his dad's health. Here on March 4th, 2014, we have Donna planning to speak in private with the defendant while she's at the rest stop in Gainesville. She asks him to delete this message after he reads it. although he's not with Harvey, and Harvey nor his birthday are mentioned in this text message. All that's mentioned in this text message is, I'm going to pull over at a rest stop and talk to you in private.
So let's talk about this for a minute. The topic that they moved to talking about is the birthday gift for Harvey. The state argued that the birthday gift for Harvey was the murder of Dan Markel, that this was a special big gift, and that it was a sort of sick family, I don't even know if you'd call it a joke, but sick family thing that they were going to give. It was a big birthday for Harvey, I think maybe 70, and they were going to give him this gift, that he was going to receive that and find out that Dan Markel was murdered, whether he was involved or not. The state used this in Charlie's testimony and in Charlie's trial to say, look, what's happened here is that Donna wants to talk privately to Charlie about this murder because that's what the gift is. But notice how important that is for Harvey's guilt or innocence. If they have to talk about that privately, then it doesn't seem like Harvey knows about this plan to murder Dan Markel. It sounds more like it's a surprise. So this is a strong point in Harvey's favor, I think, suggesting that he didn't know about this. To be honest, I thought all of this was a little questionable. It certainly seems very possible that a big gift could be something other. Charlie said it was the catering for the party, which didn't seem like a particularly big gift, but it certainly could be. It doesn't necessarily have to be a murder. I don't know where the state got that. I didn't really see any evidence of that. And so I didn't think this was a great point anyway in Charlie's trial. But if anything, it's helpful for Charlie because it suggests he didn't know about this.
On March 26, 2014, less than 4 months prior to this murder, the defendant files his grandma motion, the counter motion for enforcement of marital settlement agreement on parenting issues, and motion for contempt and sanctions. Again, alleging that Wendi is not facilitating communication between he and the kids and getting after Donna personally. In this filing, Dan Markel alleges that on 3 separate occasions in November of 2013, the children informed him of their maternal grandmother, Donna Adelson, disparaging him. The boys indicate that, quote, "Grandma says you're stupid. She says you are trying to take her sunshines away from her." And, quote, "Grandma says she hates you." He says that the litigation had no impact on his life. The emails suggest otherwise. He's included on these texts. He's all over the wiretap, meddling in Wendy's life with Donna. Could the defendant have cared enough about his sister's marital problems to commit murder? Maybe, maybe not. But if he didn't, his mom certainly cared enough with both of them. And she was in his ear all the time. In defendant's own words, "You can't have a miserable mom." Donna is the overbearing matriarch who nags everyone to death about whatever it is that's currently on her. I call it the wheel. The wheel's turning all the time, right? And Wendi getting away from Dan Markel and moving to South Florida was number 1 on the wheel. It was the top priority in 2013 and in 2014.
Now, all of this relates still to Donna and to Donna's desperate desire to have the children in South Florida near her, the grandchildren. It doesn't directly relate to Harvey. Certainly, the argument the state made could apply to Harvey as well as to Charlie. The state said Charlie was having to listen to his mom go on and on and on about how she wanted the kids here and how unfair it was and how desperately she wanted this to happen. And her unhinged beliefs about this pushed Charlie to murder or to hire people to murder Dan Markel. Theoretically, that could apply to Harvey as well. But thus far, we haven't really seen evidence that Donna was constantly complaining to Harvey. We saw that and heard that in Charlie's trial. So at this point, we don't really have the evidence yet about this having been something that Harvey regularly heard. Certainly, it's likely possible he was living in the same household with her, but we just don't have the evidence of it yet.
This slide shows all the calls between our parties on the night before the shooters made that June trip to Tallahassee. You can see a 25-minute call from Catherine Magbanowa to the defendant at 9:17 p.m. on June 2nd, 2014. This call was placed while Catherine Magbanowa was consistent with traveling on her way back from Comfort Rental Car, where the first rental car was rented. As soon as the defendant hangs up with Katie, he calls his parents' landline and has a 25-minute conversation. In the 2 years of phone records that were examined in this case, the defendant talks to his parents on the landline 28 times, or 0.07% of the times that he talks to them.
The state wanted to argue that the fact that Charlie called on a landline instead of just calling on a cell phone, as he apparently normally did 99% of the time, something like that, that he, by calling on the landline, he was sort of indicating this was something he considered secretive. This was something he considered that different, and he wanted to make sure it wasn't intercepted. Now, we don't know who he was calling. Could he have been calling Harvey? Sure, possible. The state certainly believes that Donna would have been on the phone, but so far, we don't really know who these phone calls were made. The state made the point that they were rare, that normally they talked on the cell phone, but we don't really know much more than that.
After the killers returned from Tallahassee on that first trip, we have a couple text messages of interest. On June 8th, 2014, the defendant indicates he's still working on Dad's birthday present, and Donna indicates, "I know you'll come through." On the day of the murder, we have
again, let me stop her for a second. Again, we're talking about the birthday gift and the supposed birthday gift that was the murder of Dan Markel, as if that could be a birthday gift. But the implication, as I said earlier, was that this was a surprise for Harvey, that Donna had to talk privately with Charlie about it, that she didn't want him to know or spoil the surprise, if you will.
Parties as listed here, with the red line representing the time of the murder. This flurry of calls between our persons of interest demonstrates the usual call pattern that we're seeing. Donna to the defendant, to Catherine Magbanowa, to Garcia and back. The first phone call that either Garcia or Rivera make after turning off their phones to do the murder. It's Garcia to Catherine Magbanowa.
The state argued that there was a clear method to the way the parties communicated, that what happened was Donna complained to Charlie, who went to Katie and hired the hitmen. Then the hitmen called Katie, who called Charlie to let him know things, who then told his mother. They called it a train, that it was like the cars of a train that don't ever, the car in back doesn't ever touch the car in front. They link through each other. And the state said that's pretty much what you've got here. You've got a situation where one car talks to the next, but nothing going around that. So, and the problem, I think, for prosecuting anything having to do with the question of whether or not Harvey was involved is that all of the state's evidence went to Donna talking to Charlie and not so much to Harvey talking to Charlie. So we'll see what they come up with in addition, but I'm just kind of piecing this through and saying, okay, this piece of evidence that was very important to the state in Charlie's trial, how would this play? If they were to try to charge Harvey, would this piece of evidence work? And I think this particular piece of evidence would not work. And I want to say thank you to S. Hughes. I really appreciate that. I'm so glad that you enjoy the show. It's wonderful to have you along.
Magbanowa assures them that they'll get their money the next day. At 8:23 p.m., Catherine Magbanowa and the defendant make.
And I probably need to give a little explanation here. So this is Katie Magbanowa assuring the hitmen, don't worry, even though you've already killed Dan Markel, you're gonna get your money. Don't worry, it's coming.
Plans to meet up at his house. At 9 p.m., Donna texts the defendant, outside your house, to which he responds, 10 men. He told you from the witness stand that this text meant that Donna was just passing by his house on her way to Tallahassee and that they weren't meeting up. But Catherine Magbanua testified that when she arrived at defendant's house, the defendant advised her that his parents had just been there, and then he thought his mom had physically washed the money, which was damp when Catherine Magbanua received it. So he says he's going to be about 10 minutes out. Here he is, hitting at home at 9:40 p.m. At 9:46, we see Catherine Magbanua, consistent with being at Rivera's residence, and then consistent with heading toward the defendant's residence. She turns her phone off, and it stays off for 11 hours. When Magbanua's phone pops back up, it's 9:44 a.m. on Saturday morning, and she's headed back from the defendant's house, or the direction of his house, toward Rivera's residence. That's the money drop location.
I think this would probably be the best evidence that the state has against Harvey. What the state says happened was the Adelsons needed cash so that they could pay for the hitmen who had just killed Dan Markel. So on the night of the murders, Katie Magbanua, who hired the hitmen, came over to pick up the cash from Charlie Adelson's home. And just coincidentally, at about that time, Harvey and Donna Adelson stopped by his house. The state says that I think, because Katie testified this way, that there was suggestion that they had actually put this, that they had dropped cash off at Charlie's house. How was that known? Because it had been laundered and it was still wet. I mean, literally laundered, as in washed in the washing machine, and it was still wet and damp, and even moldy later on because it had been wet. There seems to be a little bit of confusion in this area because of the fact that one of the state's additional points was that Charlie always stapled his cash. And then Luis Rivera said the cash he received was stapled. And other people talked about the stapling of cash by Charlie as well. And he stapled it in $1,000 packets of $100 bills. And that was unusual. So that was one of the ways they felt sure that this cash had come from Charlie Adelson. So, but if this cash came from Charlie Adelson, then why was it wet? And why had it been laundered by the mother? Did all of the Adelsons staple their cash? That part wasn't really known. Now, Charlie argued that his mother and father were just passing by on the highway near his home, that they didn't actually stop, that they didn't actually come by his house because he wasn't going to be home for another 10 minutes. The state says they did. They stopped by. They dropped off cash.
Who did it appear had a motive to want Dan Markel dead? His own family. And
did I get that again? No. Well, I have a little bit better idea where I was. All right, let's see. Where was I? Oh, I hope I was right there.
To meet up at his house. At 9 p.m., Donna texts the defendant, "Outside your house," to which he responds, 10 minutes.
What was that?
He told you from the witness stand that this
Okay,
text
we'll go a little bit further on. Okay.
At home at 9:40 p.m.
That's real close.
At 9:46,
we'll have a sentence we have to go. Yeah, my apologies.
Rivera's residence.
If I grab my finger or grab the cursor, it runs it back.
She turns her phone off, and it stays off for 11 hours. When Magbanua's phone, Rivera's residence. That's the money drop location.
All right.
The defendant said he put her on the payroll at Adelson Institute at her request to help her get insurance for her kids, with the understanding that the money was being funneled through her to someone else and she wasn't actually getting any of the proceeds. She was just going to use that paycheck to assist her with getting subsidized housing or insurance, I think it was, for her kids. But you can see from this slide, which is dated June 24th, 2014, that she's texting him about getting on the payroll prior to this alleged first extortion effort. He says no problem at that time. This is between the first and second trips. She's asking to be on the payroll. And the wiretap and bump were designed to answer.
And I think some of this evidence related to the payroll is also something that the state would be able to use against Harvey. The state proved pretty significantly, to the point where Charlie Adelson finally just admitted it, that there was not actually there was never a time when Katie Midbanawa was actually working for the Adelson Institute. She was just getting paid for doing nothing. And the state said, why is that? The reason they believed is because this was payoff for her, because she had hired the hitmen for them, because she had done this work for them. It's more or less hush money in addition to payment for what she'd done. So certainly, since Harvey was at various times the owner or part owner of the Adelson Institute, he might be expected to know that. However, it was Donna who actually wrote the checks out to Katie Midbanawa, and it was Donna who ran the payroll and ran the finances. So it's not necessarily clear that Harvey would have known about that, even if, in fact, he was in charge of the Adelson Institute and possibly should have known about it. So I want to thank Meredith's 2 cents. I appreciate that very much.
Answer those questions. She goes straight to this defendant, who goes straight to Catherine Midbanawa, who goes straight to Sigfredo Garcia. In that first call after the bump, Donna says she doesn't want to talk on the phone, but defendant can't leave it alone. He asks, does it involve me or other people? Her answer, well, probably the both of us. Probably both of us. He says, what's that? Probably the two of us. So you probably have a general idea what I'm talking about.
Now that's where I'm going to stop, and we're going to now move to another section, but I want to talk a little bit about what you just heard. The bump was an action by law enforcement where somebody, a law enforcement officer undercover, actually bumped into, although I don't think they called it for that reason, but they came up to Donna Adelson on the street as she was dropping the kids off, or picking them up, from school, and said, hey, we need you to take care of this guy, Lewis, who was actually one of the people involved. And it was very cryptic. It wasn't said as openly as that. But basically, this person said to her, hey, we know you've taken care of Katie. We know you've taken care of Sigfredo. And now you need to take care of everybody. Handed her a newspaper article about the murder of Dan Markel with the number $5,000 written on it and a telephone number. The point was that it had been about 2 years since the murder, and the state finally had permission to do wiretaps. But now it's 2 months after the murders, and so their concern was, who's going to be talking about it by now? They're moved on. They think they've gotten away with this. And Donna says is that there were 2 people who were involved. So she calls Charlie and says, this just happened. She doesn't tell him. She says, we need to talk. Something just happened. And he says, who does this involve? And she says, probably the both of us, probably both of us, probably the 2 of us. All of that really suggests that Harvey wasn't that involved, that it was the 2 of them. It was Donna and Charlie, if anybody, involved, and not Harvey. So I think that this particular section is one of the strongest for Harvey, as if the state arrests him, to argue that, look, he had nothing to do with this. When the state tried to get everybody talking about what had happened, it was Charlie talking to Donna, and the 2 of them didn't seem to think it involved Harvey at all. Now, I want to switch us over to a little excerpt from the bump. This is that, and it started with this extortion attempt from Donna and followed what the state said was a pattern. Donna called Charlie, talked to Charlie privately, not on the phone. Then Charlie went and had lunch at Dolce Vita, a restaurant there locally, and had lunch with Katie Midbanawa, and they talked. Undercover law enforcement was actually present at the restaurant, and they recorded some of the conversation. During Katie's trial, it was very hard to hear. It was, and it still isn't great, but I'm going to show you a little bit of the recording. And I also have a transcript. So I'm going to read that. You can actually see what happened. It's only, I think, a 1-minute clip. And then I'm going to read what they said, so you are sure that you can understand it. Now, This was at a restaurant, so there's a lot of noise around. There were two different undercover agents who were trying to record the conversation, and then the enhanced video was the two were put together. Video is better with one, audio is better in the other, and they tried to clean it up. Now, I only used a minute because this is just the part that has a comment that I think is important on the issue of Harvey. So let's add this to the stage. Here we go.
Problem is, even if they bug this, even if they bug your whole phone, nobody will watch it. But even if they bug your phone, okay, you're even if they bug your phone, you're still not talking about anything. So my point is, how do you get people to talk? You throw smoke grenades, and then you get all the cockroaches to run out. There's smoke in the house, smoke in the house. And everyone's running and everyone's talking, and you throw a smoke grenade, what do you think? Listen, if that's what it was, it's very smart, because that means my mom hasn't told my dad anything. My dad's going to flip out when he finds out. But my mom hasn't told my dad anything. But normally, obviously, if that was a cop that came and spoke to my mom, that night, when she comes home from work, she would say, "Guess what? I got 20. Guess who paid me a little visit when I'm taking the grandkids to school?"
So let me go ahead and read that because it's super hard to hear, even enhanced. This is Charlie talking to Katie at this restaurant. And the only voice they were really able to pick up was Charlie's. And Charlie said, if they had any evidence, we would have already gone to the airport. Now, that's been used against both Charlie and Donna. In fact, Donna was arrested at the airport, leaving for a country that did not have an extradition treaty with the United States. But the problem is, Charlie says, even if they bug this, even if they bug your home phone, nobody is going. Then he says, even if they bug your phone, he says it a few times, you're still not talking about any of this. So my point is, how do you get people to talk? You throw smoke grenades and then you get all of the cockroaches to run out. There's smoke in the house. There's smoke in the house. And everyone's running and everyone's talking and you throw a smoke grenade. What do you think? And that is actually fairly accurate. That is what law enforcement was trying to do. They were trying to get everybody talking again. And he says, listen, if that's what it was, it's very smart because that means my mom hasn't told my dad anything. My mom knows my dad is going to flip out when he finds out, but my mom hasn't told my dad anything. But normally, obviously, if that was a cop that came and spoke to my mom and that night when he comes home from work, she would say, guess who something probably saw today, or guess who paid me a little visit when I'm taking the grandkids to school. So he is saying directly that my mom knows my dad is going to flip out when he finds out, but my mom hasn't told my dad anything. Now, there were a lot of things that he said during this period of time that you really do have to take with a grain of salt. It was real difficult to tell what exactly he was saying in case someone was listening or in case Katie was a plant and what he was saying because it was true. For example, he talked about the fact that she was cleaning the office on the weekends when in fact he would later admit, no, she really wasn't. She was not cleaning the office on the weekends. He had just made that up. So but the state says the bump is all about the plot to kill Dan Markel, and the family, as well as Katie Mbanwa, they're all talking about who is this who is trying to do the extortion? Is it law enforcement or is it friends and family of the hitmen who are trying to extort money from the Adelson family? And so if this is all about the murder plot, which is certainly what the state believes, then this is a huge comment to help Harvey because it suggests he didn't know. Charlie says, that means my mom hasn't told my dad anything. My mom knows my dad is going to flip out when he finds out, but my mom hasn't told my dad anything. So Harvey could easily use that to argue, look, I didn't know anything about what was going on, and this is evidence of that. And I want to say thank you to Atticus. I appreciate that very much. So the next place I want to take us is to a conversation between Charlie and Harvey. They went out to a restaurant together, met Suri's, it's a sushi restaurant, and at trial, the jury had a transcript, but the people watching did not. So I honestly found this completely incomprehensible during the trial because I couldn't understand anything that was said. I have about a 3-minute excerpt that, and you can listen to it if it gets too, I've got a transcript and I'm going to read it to you also because I do think it's a little bit hard, but I want you to kind of get a feel for what it was like and what was going on during this conversation. This again was recorded by law enforcement. They were sitting right there beside Charlie and Harvey as they ate at this sushi restaurant and talked to each other. Let me tell you, the reason for this weird view is at trial, we didn't get this description at the bottom of what was said. This little, you can see it typed at the bottom. This came from a hearing that was about a year beforehand, as the defense argued that some of this evidence shouldn't come in at trial, and the state argued that it should. I'm going to zip through because it's really hard to hear. I want you to see at one spot, Charlie looks over. Do you see his eye right there in the little hole? What's happened is they've got the camera inside a bag with some holes on one side, so and it's pointed directly at them. Charlie looks over and he figures out, he says later at his trial, and certainly some of the conversation sounds like it, that he knew that something was going on, that this was something that was happening, that it looked to him like maybe law enforcement was actually recording them. And so I'll take you through it. We'll listen to a few seconds more, but it's really hard. I'm mostly just going to read it to you. You can get a sense of what it was like, middle of a restaurant, and they're being recorded secretly, surreptitiously by an undercover agent. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop it and pull it out and then just read you the transcript because I think it was really hard to understand. So Charlie Adelson says, there is none. You can say it all day long. And what they're talking about is apparently by now, Harvey knows about the extortion attempt against Donna. Who knows what else he knows or when he knew it, but he knows at least that there's been an extortion attempt. And they're going to, Charlie and Harvey are kind of talking about that. They won't say too much because of their belief that, because of Charlie's belief that they may be being recorded. So Charlie says, you can say it all day long. I can even tell you he's a blank. That's it. All day long. It's not done like that. Now, from Charlie's testimony, we can guess he's saying this isn't how extortions work. And the funny thing is, and then Charlie leans over and talks into Harvey's ear. They wouldn't. And then he stops, Charlie does, and looks over at the agent. Then he leans back in and talks in Harvey's ear again, clearly kind of recognizing that something was going on. Something seemed off. They said they wouldn't want to talk to Wendi, so you're the next to talk to. This is Charlie. And Harvey says, I know they wouldn't talk to her. They've already something. And Harvey says, I was surprised they didn't come to me, presumptively instead of Donna, since they went to Donna to start everything as opposed to Harvey. And Charlie says, one or the other. Harvey says, what? And Charlie says, one or the other, but the woman is usually the weaker choice. You know, someone that's going to give in. So it is what it is. And Harvey then says, that's what Katie agreed with you. And Charlie says, yeah. And Charlie then says, that's where you're at. The thing is, I actually think it's you knew at some point. Harvey, oh yeah. Charlie, somebody, they had to reach out. They had to do something. Harvey says, yeah. Charlie, they had to send listen, if simply asked you a question, yes or no, someone's just going to say no. So there has to be some kind of tactic to come into the introduction that's like, and Harvey says it makes sense. It really does. I didn't think they were that smart. And Charlie says, and the funny thing is, and Harvey says, right. They then talk to the restaurant workers a little bit. And Charlie says, hey, you're going to say, listen, if 50% of people want to cooperate, why would you not? Like, because it's the attitude of, all right, I'll pay you to make it go away. But it's utter nonsense. Charlie then says, I think there's a recorder in that bag. Harvey says, are they allowed to do that? And Charlie says, not without a warrant. I'll talk to you outside about it. And Harvey says, yeah. And then the remainder of the conversation, it was explained to us, is not related to the investigation. So out of that, there's been much made of the fact that Harvey mentions, does Katie agree with you? And Charlie says, yes. Now, speculation has been, well, that can mean that Harvey knew Katie was involved. And he's saying, talking about her involvement in the murder scheme. But I think it's more likely, given how much later this is and that it's after the bump, that he's talking about the question that's on their minds, which is this an extortion from law enforcement, or is this an extortion from somebody who is connected to Luis Rivera, because that's who they claim to be? And I wouldn't see this as any kind of admission to knowledge in advance about the murder. But I am curious about what you think. So go ahead and put your thoughts in the chat. A 1, if you think he's admitting he knew that Katie was involved in the murder, or 2, if you don't really hear that out of what he's saying. Now, there also, I thought was really interesting, the reaction to the bag. Now, on the stand, Charlie specifically told us he thought this was law enforcement, that he knew it was law enforcement. He said one of the things he noticed was that the guy was in a sushi restaurant and he didn't order sushi, and he was all by himself. He said, who goes all by themselves to a sushi restaurant and they don't like sushi? Like, what's up with that? So he said, I thought that this was somebody from law enforcement. I figured that's why I could tell that there was something wrong, and I thought they might be recording us. I thought it was interesting too, Harvey's statement, I didn't think they were that smart. If he seems to be thinking that this is law enforcement, but what on earth does he mean? Because that's absolutely what they would do, is undercover surveillance. And I don't see how that would not be smart. I did think that was a little confusing about what he was saying. So is this where Harvey found out? Is this about the time he found out? We don't know. He's very calm. He certainly doesn't seem to be, he doesn't seem to be angry. He isn't saying, how could you? It's outrageous that you did this. So now I want to flip over to the probable cause affidavits. And I want to kind of talk through some of the stuff that we have learned from the probable cause affidavits. And I want to start with Charlie's probable cause affidavit, which actually had a little more about Harvey and even Donna than her own affidavit for her arrest warrant did. That may be because it was done so quickly, because she was leaving the country and going to Vietnam and they arrested her at the airport. So let's pull that up. I want to go ahead and pull up. This is the probable cause affidavit for Charlie Adelson. And I'm going to, we aren't going to read the whole thing. I'm going to take you through to some important points that seem to me to have something to do with this. And I want to start with their theory of the murder, is what they call it. This is the state's theory of the murder. It is investigators' belief that after her divorce from Markel, let me make sure I got this set up right. Okay, well, I've done my fancy new, my fancy new look. I need to at least use it. It is investigators' belief that after her divorce from Markel, Wendi Adelson and her brother Charlie, as well as her parents, Harvey and Donna Adelson, were determined to relocate Wendi and the 2 Markel children to South Florida, where the Adelsons reside. After exhausting all efforts to force or compel Markel into agreeing to allow his ex-wife and children to relocate to South Florida, the subject family members, previously identified, realized any hope of a legal remedy in their favor was futile. Investigators obtained information that Markel and Wendi had gone through a bitter divorce. Wendi filed for divorce on September 10th, 2012, when Markel was out of town. The divorce was later finalized by a marital settlement agreement on July 31st, 2013. However, after filing for divorce and prior to the finalization, Wendi relocated with their 2 children to her parents' home in Coral Springs, Broward County, Florida. Markel objected, and on June 20th, 2013, Leon County Circuit Judge Hobbs formally denied with prejudice, meaning she couldn't bring it up again, Wendy's motion for relocation with the children. After the court's denial, investigation revealed that Wendy's parents, especially her mother, Donna Adelson, repeatedly tried to convince Wendi to coerce Markel into allowing the relocation to South Florida. Donna suggested the family offer Markel $1 million to allow the children to relocate to South Florida. Donna and her husband would contribute a third, Wendi a third, and Charlie Adelson would contribute a third. Donna also suggested that Wendi lie to Markel and tell him the children were going to be converted to Catholicism. The Adelsons knew that Markel and his family were very strict in the Jewish faith, and they believed that any suggestion that his children would be baptized and raised Catholic would convince him to allow the children's relocation. This latter suggestion was in spite of the fact that the Adelsons are also Jewish. When Wendi refused these tactics, Donna was extremely upset. Prior to Markel's murder, he had filed a motion alleging Wendi had failed to disclose all of her financial assets and a motion to require supervised visitation for Donna. Markel alleged the children had disclosed that Grandma, Donna, had said Markel was stupid and she hates you. The children further said that Grandma hated Markel because he was taking her sunshines away from her. The motions were scheduled for May 15, 2014. However, attorneys for both sides had to withdraw due to conflicts. New counsel was retained, but a new court date was unable to be scheduled before Markel's murder. So you can see all of that discussion talks about the family. Mostly it relates to Donna. Mostly it relates to Donna's attitude and Donna's actions and what Donna was upset about. But Wendi had even been living with Harvey and Donna. There were definite indications that it was a family issue as well. And that's what the state definitely argues throughout Charlie's trial and then throughout the probable cause affidavit, both for Charlie and for Donna, that's already been filed. The state also said initially Wendi was cooperative during her interview and confirmed Markel was her ex-husband with whom she shared custody of their children. During her interview, Wendi made statements suggesting the murder of Markel could have been arranged by someone on her behalf without her knowledge. Wendi further suggested that someone could have arranged the murder thinking it would help her, and mentioned that her brother, Charlie, had joked about hiring a hitman to kill Markel in the past. Specifically, she said her brother makes a lot of jokes in bad taste and had previously commented that he had looked into hiring a hitman, but it was cheaper to buy her a television as a divorce gift. However, Wendi indicated that she did not think her brother would actually commit this crime. So again, we've got a lot of focus on Charlie, but we've got comments about someone on her behalf could have possibly arranged the murder of Dan Markel, and she popped out with that immediately following his murder when she's being interviewed by the police. Then, while in the interview room, Wendi wanted to call her parents to notify them of the incident. While contemplating aloud as to what she would say, she told the victim advocate sitting next to her that her parents were very angry with Markel and described it as a very effed up situation. Now, that's her parents, plural, not just Donna, not just her mother, but her parents were very angry. It was a situation. And so, again, the implication is it's the whole family. Wendy's parents, Harvey and Donna Adelson, made contact with the lead TPD, Tallahassee Police Department investigator at Markel's memorial service on Sunday morning, July 20th, 2014 in Tallahassee at the Shamray Torah Synagogue. I probably said that wrong. They agreed to contact the TPD investigator to arrange an interview before returning to their home in South Florida. The following day, the TPD investigator contacted Wendi on her cellular telephone. Once the investigator identified himself, Wendi claimed to have a bad connection and the call was terminated. Less than 5 minutes later, Wendy's attorney called the investigator at the same telephone number used to call Wendi and informed him that Wendi left town with her children and parents en route to South Florida. The attorney could not provide a date for Wendy's return to Tallahassee and requested he be contacted for any further inquiries. Harvey and Donna Adelson left Tallahassee with Wendi and the grandchildren the day after the memorial service without speaking with this investigator as promised. Since leaving, no one in the Adelson family has contacted TPD or inquired about the status of the investigation. So obviously the state wants to say there was this agreement that we're going to talk to you, we will meet with you, we'll discuss things with you. And then they headed out of town before there was any conversation, before they had any kind of connection. And that the state believes is sort of evidence that they were afraid to talk to the police, that they were concerned that they would reveal too much. So, but I think clearly the Adelsons could say there were a lot of suspicions around them. It's a common thing to ask that your attorney be present or even not to talk to the police. In this case, they may have felt like Harvey and Donna that the call from Wendy's attorney covered all of them and said, none of us are going to talk to you without an attorney present. Call the attorney instead. So I'm not sure that that's going to be evidence that would be used against Harvey. It's just something that kind of flavors things. It's how the state saw it. Now, I'm picking out the parts that I think had something relevant to Harvey. Cellular records show numerous contacts between Catherine Medbanowa and both Charlie Adelson and Sigfrido Garcia. On one occasion, telephone records show contact between both Garcia's and Medbanowa's telephones, and a cellular telephone registered to Harvey Adelson, Charlie and Wendy's father. So this cellular record was something where there was a phone call that wasn't picked up. It went through to voicemail from Sigfrido Garcia. From testimony at trial, it sort of appeared that what had happened was there was a confrontation between Sigfrido, because Charlie was with Katie. Katie was Sigfrido's ex. She was perhaps his ex-wife. That at least Luis Rivera testified he considered her his wife. They had children together. They were separated, but Katie was with Charlie, and there was a confrontation. And then after that, there was this phone call. The suggestion was that what had happened was that Sigfrido Garcia was really angry, called up, left a hostile voicemail, and that hostile voicemail accidentally got left on Harvey's phone. It was something that was an accident. It wasn't something that was anything that was for Harvey. It was just something where he had gotten the Adelsons mixed up. He looked up a dentist who was an Adelson and called that number and then left a message for Harvey, meaning to leave it for Charlie. So I don't know if that's going to be huge evidence against Harvey, but in any event, that is one of the pieces of evidence that I think that we should at least consider what they might use. And I want to say thank you, Cutley. I appreciate that very much. All right, so let's keep reading with what we were looking at. That's the cellular phone call. And they go through sort of what happened with the cellular phone call. At 5:05, Medbanowa made contact with Garcia. They talk 6 minutes, 22 seconds. 9 minutes later, Garcia tries to call Harvey's cell phone, and this went to voicemail. And it says there's no known reason for Garcia to call Harvey Adelson. We did get a reason for that later, which was this mistaken identity where Garcia may have thought he was calling Charlie and chewing Charlie out for being with Katie. And there were more conversations. And then Medbanowa tried to call Harvey too. That could well have been I'm so sorry. I have an unhinged ex who called you and left this strange message. Please ignore that. So that may not be all that significant in evidence, but in any event, I wanted to make sure I mentioned it since it was something else that related to Harvey specifically that was named in the probable cause affidavit. Now we get into Medbanowa's finances. Investigation indicates that prior to the homicide, Medbanowa was employed at a Miami area dental office. Investigation revealed that after the homicide occurred in July 2014, Medbanowa started receiving paychecks from the Adelson Institute for Aesthetics and Implant Dentistry, which were handwritten and signed by Donna Adelson. Now, of course, this is Harvey's dentistry practice. It's not Donna's dentistry practice, even though she's writing the checks. These paychecks started in September 2014 and were consistently in the amount of $407.58. The memo section of each check indicated it was for a period of 10 days, usually preceding the date of the check. The checks continued at least through January 2016. On at least 2 different occasions, Mbanawa received paychecks in advance of the time period indicated on the check. The checks appear to have been written at the same time, either using the same date or in check number sequence, with the memo covering a 10-day period past the date of the check. Investigation of Mbanawa's bank accounts revealed a significant increase in cash deposits after Markel's murder. So all of that has some evidence that might be related to Harvey, because he did own the dental practice, and these were payments made. And Charlie admitted on the stand that, in fact, Katie was not working. Katie admitted she wasn't working for the Adelson Institute. So these checks were being paid for no clear or apparent reason. Now, the state believes, of course, that the reason they were being paid is because Katie had hired the hitmen for them, but not because she was doing any work. So cellular telephone location records do not show Mbanawa going to the Adelson Institute for Aesthetic and Implant Dentistry. So they're proving she didn't go there. She wasn't working there. She wasn't cleaning on the weekends, as Charlie implied. Now, this is another possible way that Harvey might be included. And I want to say thank you to Pegasus, and I'll answer that question in just a second. Investigators have also learned that Mbanawa has been in possession of and operating a 2001 Lexus LS430 sedan automobile, which was registered to Harvey Adelson and previously used by Charlie Adelson. Mbanawa started using the Lexus as early as September 2015. On January 23, 2016, the title for this car was transferred to Mbanawa, and a new license plate was obtained in Mbanawa's name. Motor vehicle records indicate the vehicle was sold to Mbanawa for the price of $1,700. None of Mbanawa's bank records show a withdrawal for $1,700. Research of auto value websites indicates the minimum retail value of this vehicle is $6,000. The state wants to say that this car was given to Katie Mbanawa as payment, as a way of currying favor with the person who had hired the hitman, making sure she was constantly satisfied and happy and wouldn't turn on them. It was actually Harvey's old car, so this pulls him in. On the other hand, he sold the car to her, according to the records, for $1,700. And while they say that her bank records don't show a withdrawal of that, they also made the point elsewhere that Katie had massive amounts of cash, that she had $55,000 in cash deposit. I think it was that much in a single year. So perhaps $1,700 in cash wouldn't have been all that hard for her to procure. And that the minimum retail value is $6,000. So maybe they cut her a break, but that's, an ex-girlfriend, that's probably not all that strong. But it is yet another way that they could pull Harvey in and say Harvey also had some relationships and contacts with Katie, and therefore it wasn't just Charlie. And now I'm headed down toward the spot where I will answer Pegasus' question. Well, I'll go ahead and do that. Did Harvey have a one-way ticket to Dubai too? And the answer, I think, is yes, based on what we saw in the next probable cause affidavit. I'll read that to you in just a minute. You'll be able to see that for yourself. On Monday, April 25th, 2016, Charlie called Mbanawa and asked if she was on her way. It appears Charlie and Mbanawa have been communicating through a different source to schedule a meeting. This is after the bump. Everybody is talking about what's going on. Charlie directs her to Harvey and Donna's building to meet with them. Charlie told Mbanawa that he was talking to his parents about everything. Huge point, because now that indicates that Charlie is discussing the bump, everything that's happened with his parents. Charlie continues to try and convince her to meet at Donna and Harvey's building, but eventually gives in and agrees to meet with her at another location. This, again, would be something that would rope Harvey and Donna in, but it's after the fact. This is not direct evidence that Harvey was involved or connected to any scheme beforehand. And there was some evidence that he wasn't. On May 5th, 2016, Charlie arrives at the Icon and they agree to meet at the pool area. This is where the Adelsons lived, to discuss the text message. This time, Harvey is present. Unlike other times when Charlie and Donna talked alone, Harvey is present with Charlie and Donna as they huddle at a corner area for privacy. There is no oral intercept captured, so they weren't able to overhear it. They could just see that Harvey, Charlie, and Donna met. And it may be that it was sometime in about this time frame that Charlie learned about the murder. I feel sure that's what Charlie would argue, is that he didn't know about it before, and this is when he started to learn about it. Okay, so now that covers the majority of what they had to say in the probable cause affidavits. I want to take you briefly to the two other probable cause affidavits that have been filed and just show you some different points that were made, and we'll answer Pegasus' question a little bit more as well. So, this is the probable cause affidavit for Donna's arrest. Adelson, and they talked about Wendi Adelson and her brother Charles, as well as their parents, Harvey and Donna Adelson, were determined to have Wendi and the two Markel children relocated to South Florida. So talking about both of them, both Harvey and Donna. After the court's denial, Wendy's parents, plural, especially her mother, Donna Adelson, repeatedly tried to convince Wendi to coerce Markel into allowing the relocation to South Florida. And I say, while contemplating aloud as to what she would say, this is Wendi. She told the victim advocate sitting next to her that her parents were very angry with Markel, plural, and described it as a very effed up situation. So again, suggestion that it was both the parents. It wasn't just Donna. That's what the state is arguing, that it was both of them together. Sorry, don't mean to make you dizzy. I do have, yes, I have it so you can see this. Okay. All right. Hey, and this is Charlie talking to Katie at the bump. It was a quote from there. You know, I'm the one who's like, anything I can, you know, you don't ask. I'm the one who's like, hey, I'll sell you the Lexus for a very good price. And so Charlie is kind of taking ownership of that. I'll sell you my dad's Lexus for a very good price. I know you're having car problems. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm the one who I don't have to tell you, I show you. There's a difference. And so Charlie is suggesting to her, hey, I've taken good care of you. And the state would argue, well, that's something he was doing so she wouldn't turn against him because she was involved in this murder plot. But it's this sort of taste. This would be an argument Harvey could say, like, I'm not the one who sold the Lexus for a good price. That was Charlie. So let's skip now. Did I just have those? Yes, just those 2 points. So let me skip now. This was the application and affidavit for search warrant where the state had actually collected Harvey's iPad and 2 cell phones when they searched his house, Donna's house, the day after Donna was arrested. She was arrested on the 13th. The search happened on the 14th. At that time, they collected Harvey's phones and iPad. They did not look at them, apparently. Instead, 2 weeks later, on the 28th, they actually applied for a search warrant so they could look at the phones, look at what was in the phones, not simply have the phones and possess them, but actually look at them and what the contents were. You know, it's not totally clear why there was that 2-week delay. You can think of lots of different reasons. Maybe they were figuring out whose they were. Were they Donna's or Harvey's? Maybe they were figuring out whether they even needed them. Maybe they were busy with other cases. It was the Thanksgiving holiday. I mean, who knows what happened in there? But the probable cause affidavit doesn't have a lot of new information. It doesn't say, we've searched Donna's phone and found this, and this, and that's what caused us to want these items from Harvey and to want to be able to search them. So that's not anything we know about. But I'll take you briefly through this and just show you a couple of points. That was his iPad. This is one. There were 3. This was for his iPad. Seized on the 14th. It says, during her interview, Adelson made statements, this is Wendi, that this is the interview right after the murder of Dan Markel. Adelson made statements that suggested the death of Markel could have been arranged by a friend or family member on her behalf, without her knowledge. And during the investigation, it was also learned Adelson, this is Wendi, was the sole recipient of a large life insurance policy for Daniel Markel. Adelson is the person who has the most to gain by the death of Markel. Now, one of the reasons I included that is because it's something very specific, as you can see, about Wendi that wasn't in some of the other information. It's as if they were beefing it up to include Wendi a little more too. And I thought some of you would be particularly interested in what they were doing there. They talked about that one phone contact between Sigfrido Garcia and Harvey Adelson. I don't think that's super strong since it just went to voicemail and since there was an alternative explanation. And now we are going to get into Pegasus' question about the flight out of the country. On November 7th, 2023, at 11:30 p.m., Donna and Harvey Adelson booked flights to Vietnam with a stop in Dubai. The flight EK0214 departs Miami, Florida on November 13, 2023 at 8:10 p.m. to Dubai. Flight EK0392 departs Dubai on November 15, 2023 at 9:35 a.m. and lands in Saigon at 7:35 p.m. There were no return flights booked. Vietnam is currently a country with no extradition treaty with the U.S. And what that means is that if you go to that, there isn't an already established treaty that says, oh, sure, if you have somebody who's a fugitive from within your borders, U.S., we will send that person back. And usually you would do the same to us. It's usually a joint treaty that, hey, if someone tries to flee from our country to yours, we'll send them back. We'll just agree that if you request that, we'll do that. In this case, they're saying there wasn't a treaty with Vietnam. So if they were there, it'd be a lot of red tape, a lot of figuring out how do we get this person back because there's not a direct, easy route already set up. On Monday, November 13th, 2023, a friend of Charles Adelson contacted the state's attorney's office in Tallahassee. They advised Donna and Harvey. Let me make sure. Yep. Oh, wait, I'm not. Yeah, I am. Okay. They advised Donna and Harvey contacted them Sunday, November 12th, 2023, regarding travel to the Philippines. The Adelsons advised they had travel plans to Saigon until November 20th, 23, but no further plans at the time. So I think the answer to Pegasus' question is they didn't have a plan to come back, and that would include Harvey as well as Donna. So this family friend has known the Adelsons were seeking advice for airlines as well as places to stay. This family friend has known the Adelsons for over 10 years and has never had longer than a 5-minute conversation with Donna or Harvey. They found the contact very strange. Harvey Adelson told the subject, "You must not mention to Charlie anything about our plans." On Monday, November 13th, 2023, at approximately 8 p.m., Donna Adelson was taken into custody at the Miami-Dade International Airport as she entered the jetway for her flight. Donna was in possession of a cell phone at the time of apprehension. As Special Agent Pat Sanford attempted to seize her cell phone, Donna attempted to pull away and prevent him from grabbing it. Donna said she was told not to give her phone to law enforcement. So this entire incident obviously includes Harvey. Harvey was right there with Donna. They were both at the airport. They were both planning to leave the country, but neither one had been charged at that point in time. Neither one had been charged, much less convicted, of the murder of Dan Markel. So at that point, there wasn't a duty to stay in the United States. There wasn't a duty to not travel to a country that didn't have an extradition treaty. But the state will argue without question, I think, that for Donna Adelson, this was knowledge of guilt and that she was trying to flee. And there may be argument that Harvey was participating too. It would be very interesting to find out what exactly he has on his phone that relates to this. Is there conversation between the two of them? So they talk about what they seized at the home. And I think one of the things that I did want to point out was they asked for the iPad and to be able to search it back to June 2012 to the present. So that's before Wendi filed for divorce from Dan Markel. That's before the divorce, before the murder. it's not simply related to the flight. So they aren't just looking at whether Harvey knew that Donna felt like she might be arrested and was trying to get out of the country quickly. They aren't just looking at that. They're looking at more than that. The dates are for longer than that. But here's what they say is the reason. The data being sought is any that would further the investigation into the communications and actions of Donna Adelson, not Harvey, Donna, during the crime, and of any events related to this incident before the crime occurred. But they do add this: the data may also serve to identify those subjects who carried out the act with him. I think that was just a mistake. We found that in more than one affidavit. With Donna, I think it means carried out the act with Donna, and the location of any outstanding evidence. So I think, and yeah, that hits the end of what I was going to talk about in that. So I'll go ahead and pull that out and and go ahead and start talking to y'all again. So at this point, the evidence, I do want to get your thoughts about what the evidence against Harvey shows, how strong you think it is. And I want to talk a little bit more about, so I'm going to ask your opinion about that. Be thinking about that, or even just be putting it in the chat right now. And I want to look through and see what you have, but I wanted to say a few more words about it. That one of the important things to notice is, I think, that when they arrested Donna and when they went and got filed the probable cause affidavit, got a search warrant, they did all of those things for Donna and did not do them for Harvey. I mean, Harvey's at the airport too. Harvey's headed out, but they don't arrest him. They don't file a probable cause affidavit. They don't indict him. They don't have a search warrant for him at that time. None of that happened. Instead, there was a period of time before they even asked for his cell phones or asked for a warrant so they could look at his 2 cell phones and his iPad. So there was definitely, in the state's mind, I think, a difference between the two and in terms of the evidence of the two. So I am really curious. I'm going to head over and see. I'm curious what people are saying. Oh, there are lots of questions here. Okay. So I will take a question or two, but we've been a really long time. I am really exhausted. So I'm just going to, I'll answer a question or two, but I probably won't be able to do as many as usual. And then I'll answer a question or two, give you my thoughts, and then we'll call it a wrap at that point. When is Charlie's sentencing date? It is this month, really soon. I forget the exact date. Could it be the 12th? I don't know. Somebody put that in the chat. I've forgotten the exact date. Beautiful Rose asks, why have they not released the video of the airport, them arriving, checking in, going to the gate? I'm sure they've collected all of that, and there also might well be body cam. I'd be interested in seeing that part where she tries to keep her phone away from the agent who's trying to take it. So that would be of interest too. And I'm sure they've collected all of that, but they haven't released any of that yet. There's, in fact, a lot that they haven't released yet. And certainly they've released nothing from the phones. They may not have even really searched them yet. So let's see. And I see that somebody, Stephen is asking me if I've read a book. I've not read that book. It sounds interesting. I'll have to take a look at that sometime. Oh, I'm sorry, not Stephen, Sarah. That was Sarah who asked me about that. And I see some people thinking that there's enough evidence. Pretty Pearls is asking me if Harvey and Wendi are arrested and the children don't wish to go with Dan Markel's parents, would Robert Adelson have custody if no other family or guardian or foster care? I think that answer is going to have to be, there would have to be a hearing and a court would have to make that determination as to where the children should go. I can't answer that. I think that would be done with a lot more evidence and information about what the kids wanted, as well as which parents they knew as well. Given that Wendi, it sounded like she was pretty estranged from Robert, they probably don't know Robert. And I think they have seen Dan Markel's parents. So probably that wouldn't in the end happen, but I can't really say that for sure, or whether or not I know. Oh, thank you, Patriotic. I appreciate that very much. All right, so let's I'm going to give you my thoughts. I want to say before I do, a big thank you to Megan O'Leary, to McSpunky, S. Hughes, Meredith's 2 cents, Atticus, Cutley, and Pegasus. Thank you, everybody. I appreciated all those super chats. So my thoughts on this are that overall, the state doesn't have great evidence against Harvey so far. They have a similar motive to what they have for Donna, but she's the one who had the email. She's the one who was involved in the phone calls, not really Harvey. And there were two clear suggestions that he was not involved in a couple of places, which I think would help his side if it came to a trial. But there are the iPad and iPhones left to be searched, and it will be a complete surprise. We don't know what will be found on those. We don't know what kind of communications he had with Charlie, with anybody else, with Donna, and it will be really fascinating to find out. That is a huge question mark that we don't have answered yet in the case, but it could make a really big difference. And it's not just his. Of course, it's also the fact that Donna's was taken as well. So Donna's will be searched, and there may be new evidence that comes from that. There may be information about Donna's communications with other people or with Charlie at the time that would indicate knowledge or lack of. But that information is really, really important and could change things a lot. I want to thank Marlon for moderating. I know we've had a busy night, and I really appreciate him doing that. Thank you all so much. We go live Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. So I will see you on Monday at 7 p.m.